This is the Extra Mile.
Oh, hi, everybody. We didn't see you there. I'm Justin. Welcome to the Extra Mile. I'm Justin. That's G5. What's up, George?
Good. Is this the Reading Rainbow?
That's right.
Reading
Rainbow.
Hi.
We should have an Extra Mile theme song on top of our intro music.
Well, the other episode you said, hey, and I was like, the theme song from Arthur came into my mind. Like, hey.
So the Smith family has this ongoing joke that I'm going to clue you in on in case you're ever on a road trip with Keith or myself now or Julie because she does it too. When you're driving down on a really long road trip and you pass a big old pile of hay and you're the first one to see it, you literally, I'm not going to do it in the microphone because it would probably blow people's eardrums out, but it's like, hey! And like you yell it as loud as you possibly can because it's hay. You're like, hey!
Oh my goodness.
I love them.
That's pretty great. That's very Keith.
Yes.
It's fun.
There's a story behind that too, that one of our other relatives, I won't mention by name so I won't embarrass anyone, but it happened to them on a road trip and they nearly like peed themselves.
It's kind of startling, I bet.
Why?
I went out to their house yesterday to give them a quote for some electrical work because they're going to reno their kitchen. And there's a sign when I really have never been to the house before. You park in the driveway and you walk onto their porch, and there's a sign that says, go away. And then you walk a few more feet and you turn, and the doormat says, welcome. And I said, this is the most contradictory, confusing
I flip
porch.
that sign around all the time because it says welcome, but on the other side. But Julie's like, no, put it back.
Look at that.
There's also a sign on the telephone pole that says Belly Acres. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I did see that.
Yes.
I thought that was really funny, the contradiction of go away, welcome. You could tell which one was Renee. Which one's Keith. Anyway, it's all in good fun, I know. Well, you had an idea that we were going to talk about confidence.
I mean, I don't know.
Confidence in ourselves.
When I think of confidence, I think of Justin. I think of you, man.
Yeah.
You seem like a very confident person.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh,
Well, you'll
yeah.
have to tell me what the magic secret is. You seem to say, be confident what you say and everything else.
Say whatever comes to my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. The other day, I was in a meeting, and we were all trying to figure out a solution to this problem. And everyone's giving their ideas and their input, and I had an idea. And usually in meetings, I don't say anything at all because I just don't like speaking up. But mainly, I'm just not very confident of a person to say something. I feel like it's going to be a dumb idea or just really, really useless to the conversation. Or maybe I wasn't even paying attention, and I chime in, and they're like, where were you, George? Like, what's going on? Like, that makes absolutely no sense. So if I just stay silent, that proverb's right. You end up looking wiser than you actually are. But I had the idea, and I was like, you know what? Should I say something? Should I not say something? I don't know. I won't say anything. And then someone else pipes up and says that exact same idea that I had. And they're like, that's the greatest idea I've ever heard. Man, you are really thinking. We should do what he just said. Like, that's the solution to our problem. We need to do that. And I was just like, well, there went that. And I was like, oh, okay. And I just kind of felt like if I had the confidence to say something, I don't know, maybe it'd be better. I don't know. But at the same time, we all came to the right solution, so it didn't really matter. But I don't know.
I think you have a good perspective on it because, I think it depends on your motivation and your heart. So, like, why would you need to say the idea if the idea was said? I think it'd be one thing if it got to the point where, okay, somebody said the idea that I had, good, we're thinking alike. And I think that's really special, too, whenever you have the same thoughts as another person. Yeah. Like, that's something to recognize. I know I'm kind of skirting around the question of instead of attacking the problem, but I think it's good to have an outlook on whenever you're engaging in like a creative collaborative process. I think it's it's one thing is if you're just so confident that you're actually blinded to wisdom, blinded to anybody else and their perspective. I think I found myself in that position several times where you just, you know what, I don't care what you think. This is right. And we go.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think more recently, I know that it's always wiser to ask other people, especially in the context of spiritual matters or even in sort of personal matters where it's one thing if you're choosing what color case to put on your phone, you know, and you're not really confident enough to make a choice of what you like or what have you. It's another thing if you're going to like move your family or if you're going to buy a house or if you're going to do like a major change. And if you just drive it on home and don't care about anybody else, then I think that says more about what's on your heart than it does whether you're soft-spoken or whether you're so caught up in not wanting to look a fool or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah.
Because you care about what other people think about you, which everybody does. I think, and I appreciate what you said because I don't consider myself a confident person. I consider myself completely lost, and I don't know what I'm doing, and that's why I try to, you know, I want to think through a problem from every possible way because I don't want to be wrong because I've been wrong before, and I've
yeah, it's not fun when you're wrong.
Well, yeah, and you look to look the fool, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've even said more recently, especially here on the podcast, where, you know what, if it makes it to where I look the fool and everybody can gain some confidence because I look the fool, then yeah, I'll be glad to do that and put that mask on.
Yeah, I mean, there is some wisdom in looking the fool. I've heard YouTube video after YouTube video of ask the dumb questions because everyone else is probably thinking it too. Mm-hmm. And that's where the insight really comes. And there's some truth to that. But in a lot of situations, you know, what is the definition of a dumb question? Right? Is it information that we all already know, or is it something we are really all thinking about? I don't know. I like what you said about confidence, though. I didn't think about it that way. The confidence is a driving force. And there is a sense of pride that you might have, and you might camouflage it as confidence. That's a driving force in a negative way, bringing other people down. But confidence in a good, godly way, that's a driving force for everyone else as well. I mean, that's going to lift everyone else up as well in whatever it is you're doing, your conversation. You were talking about making a decision if I'm going to move my family or not. Was it coming from a sense of pride or a sense of, I know this is what's right for my family? Yeah. And that is different. But at the same time, if I don't have any confidence, that's not a driving force at all, right? I'm kind of just stuck. I'm not moving, and I'm not doing anything. So there's just two avenues that just aren't very productive or helpful.
I can't remember the name of the astronaut, but I watched his TED Talk. He's the Canadian guy who's been on the International Space Station for over a year. I can't remember his name. Would you mind looking that up to help me out here? But he gave us a TED Talk talking about confidence, and I haven't thought of that until this moment, where he talked about how can you go to space? You know, how could you do a spacewalk? How could you put on a suit that was designed and built by the lowest bidder and suck all the air out of the room that you're in and open the door and go into outer space?
Yeah. That takes a lot of confidence.
Man, right?
I didn't think about that, but it does.
Or be so completely naive that it's like, no care in the world, right? But these people aren't naive. They're extremely smart, extremely well trained. And I think that might be the solution is training and practice. And, of course, in his TED Talk, it was delightful because he was talking about how nobody likes walking through a spider web. You're walking in the woods, you're out on a run, you're out walking your dog, and you walk through a spider web. You're in the dark, and now you have something on your face, and you don't know where the spider is.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it's absolutely terrifying.
That's the biggest fear, is where's the spider?
Where is the spider?
Yeah.
Is it on me? Is it on my person? Is it on my neck? I felt something on my neck.
In my hair.
Yeah. Exactly.
In the cobweb of
is
my
it
hair.
crawling into my ear and will lay its eggs in my brain?
Is it the brown recluse? Is this my last moment of living? Yeah.
Well, luckily, and that was the point that he said, is it poisonous? And the thing to remember is knowledge. So let's do some study. And what he was saying is that only non-poisonous spiders spin webs in trees. So the 3 poisonous spiders in Texas, at least, are the brown recluse, which does not spin a web. It only hides in dark places. The black widow, which does spin a web, but it's not spun. It's like imagine steel wool, or it's like a clump of web that's in a dark place. They don't spin a web out in a tree. And so black widows, when they spin a web, it's more just sort of like this rat's nest of off in the corner of a dark place somewhere.
Yeah.
And so all the poisonous spiders, and then the tarantula is the other one, which they don't spin webs. And so
They're poisonous?
yeah, I think they're really poisonous. Yeah, tarantulas are really poisonous.
Do they?
That's why they have the tarantella. They have the dance where you
What?
sweat. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But people put them in their mouths.
Gross.
Yeah. 'Cause
Anywho,
they're
well,
DUMB.
He said that super
Judgment.
confidently.
well, that is confidence to put a tarantula in your mouth. But so anyway, what his point was is that they don't spin webs, and so the spider web that you're walking through is a non-poisonous spider. Okay, so that's some of the fear gone, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's not going to hurt me, and so that's what he was talking about. It's a great TED talk about confidence.
Chris Hadfield.
Thank you, Chris.
And I started
Hadfield.
reading the background behind him, and it is fascinating. He
Yes.
went blind on a spacewalk. He can see again. But have you read that article? Or
He
did
talked
talk
about that
it
on the TED Talk, yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
Well,
that's
that's
a
the
whole
thing is you
episode in
just
itself, but
Okay.
you prepare for the ultimate calamities, right? And so that's one thing is you gain knowledge, and so you practice. You practice the spacewalks. How many times did they do that before they go up? And so that would be that's always inspired me, is to say, how do you become more confident as a person? You just have lived longer, and you've walked through more doors than people, and you've had more life experience. I can only assume that as you get older, you gain more confidence.
Yeah, it didn't help that I was the youngest in this meeting.
Well, that's something to be said, right?
Yeah.
And I remember my old mentor, Ricky, he always said that there's really no substitution for living on the earth longer than somebody. And so to have age is to have more wisdom. And so it's good to be silent and to keep your ears open. And, maybe as an interpretation of, oh, he had the same idea that I did. Interesting. So that should be a confidence booster for you, whether you said it or not. I think it would be another, I think that's really mild, even though I know that's personal.
Yeah, it was mild. I didn't really care at all. But, I thought it was interesting observation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say where the real rubber would meet the road is like, what if an entire collective of people started talking about imprisoning people because of their skin color?
Yeah.
And then you sit there and do nothing. I think that would be the more test of the confidence. Like, do I have enough courage to stand up and do what's right?
That's where, like, the Bonhoeffers of the world really encouraged me. That guy was young.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to spit in your face, Hitler.
Oh.
And, yeah. Well, he died.
Well.
But, yeah, it's
so did
confident.
Many.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with the apostles, How many of the apostles made it out of life?
True, yeah.
Without suffering?
Well, it reminded me, we're studying in the teen class right now, Stephen. And he called them stiff-necked,
and uncircumcised mind
people.
and heart and ears.
He goes on and on and on and on and on. And one of the things that it made me think of when we were talking about it is that all these people were stirred up. And he's this one guy speaking up, but it's easy to become a part of that groupthink and just not speak up either and just, go along with the crowd. But as y'all have been talking about this, the one thing that keeps going around in my head is the why. Like, why are you actually speaking up? And having the confidence to actually say something, there's a lot of wisdom in not speaking up, because sometimes you don't need to say what needs to be said. But there's other times, like literally right now, right before I was about to speak, in my chest, I could feel there's nothing to be nervous about. It's a podcast with y'all.
How many of these have we done?
Right, exactly. But anytime you have something that you want to say, there's the initial nerves behind it. And then I have to think about, why am I saying this? Is there actually going to be benefit from me saying something, or is it just that I want to say something to sound smart or to look like I have wisdom or something else like that? So the number of times that I speak up in a Bible class is very minimal, which is something that me and Julie have talked about it before. I actually want to make more comments, but at the same time too, I'm like, really, it's not about making more comments. It's about, if there's something that I think of that I believe other people would benefit from, to share some type of knowledge, whether it has wisdom or not, to then have them start thinking about good things, then that's something that should be shared. But it's always difficult to know, like, when to speak, when not to speak, and then the overthinking in your head of like,
is this productive?
Does it actually even make sense to do it? And the other thing that I thought about too was when not to speak. Job and his friends, they sat with him for 7 days and 7 nights and let him mourn. Now, kind of a different context.
That's a good one.
It's not really like confidence, but it's knowing the right situational awareness of what's happening, and do I speak or not speak, and just listen instead. So
they were right there, and then they decided to speak, and that's when they weren't right.
Honestly, in my interpretation of that, is they're such good friends. Like those friends, I mean, even though what they said on their heart and they were wrong in the eyes of God, what amazing friends that he had to sit there and mourn with you. I mean, even like if you take Peter, say, who was beloved by Jesus and very confident many times, almost to his detriment.
It seemed like these guys are pretty wealthy guys.
Well, the Job's guys,
and Job was sitting in an ash heap.
But then Peter
Tithing,
denying
anyone?
Christ at the moment of denial, right?
Yeah.
And for him to not have the confidence to stand up. And I think it comes down to fear of mankind or fear of making a mistake.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about making a mistake is, what's the worst thing that can happen? I mean, obviously, if it's like, well, I'm base jumping and I made a mistake and now I'm dead. That's the consequences, and the stakes are pretty high for that. If you're just talking about public speaking, which is a pretty major fear for most people, that's
it's like one of the top, like one
exactly.
or two, like death and public speaking.
Yeah, death is pretty high on the list for me, but it's fear of the unknown for me when you consider that.
That's why I go and write my sermons in a cemetery. Try to combine both of those together and let that one sit for a little bit.
Yeah, you just pop up like a folding table in a cemetery. Make a butter and ham sandwich.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, all right? Can you eat a butter? Now you're just being gaudy because you're saying, "Can you eat this butter and ham sandwich?"
I did say that. Yeah.
What's happened?
I don't know.
We'll cut this out.
Ed, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No. Well, for the theater, which is public speaking, it's studying. You're studying a script, right? I felt so not confident until you have like your words memorized, and then you can play, and then you can have fun. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing where if you are feeling understudied or inadequate or whatever, that will come, especially if you're diligent about studying, practicing. I think any audition or any type of job interview can be nerve-wracking. And I think it's interesting to balance our requirement of humility and humbleness and then trying to get a job. Like, how do you balance that? Mm-hmm. How do you write here's my CV and all of my accomplishments, and you have an interview, and so it's sort of like, well, what's some of your strengths? And it's like, well, I'm really confident, and I'm just trying to remain humble, and like, oh, well, I have all of my awards on my desk and my shelf. It's like, what's in my CV? What, did you not read it? I thought about that, especially in my more recent job searches, but it's just, how do you balance the humility required by God versus, well, I have to be confident enough to get this, or even speak up in in our business practices and say, okay, well, this is what I think is best for the company. And
I've always been bothered by the job interview or even the president. Every time, like, what makes you qualified to be president? And every time they speak, to me, it seems like, well, I did this and this and this and this. It just seems so braggish, I'm just bragging about this or that. And, I don't know.
Yeah, nobody likes a braggart.
Yeah, no one likes a bragging or whatever that's called. I don't know. Or a one-upper.
Words are cheap, it feels.
Words are cheap.
And then actions. I think that's one of the things that Jesus proves about like humility versus confidence. Is he had the confidence to act and to do. I am going to take action. And it's not a proclamation. It's not a throwing the windows open and letting everybody see you. It's I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do. And you're resolved almost. And that's confidence. Where you're not giving any type of thought to, you know what, I don't know, I might do this bad thing, or I'm being swayed in this other way. And if it's, I think that comes with maturity, consideration, thought, and once again, experience and wisdom. Like if you've made a mistake and you've thought about it, you've reflected on it, you resolved, even repented to not do that mistake again, there's confidence there.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so critical for us to examine our own lives and just to say, you know what, I'm going to confess this sin to somebody, to God even, where I made this mistake. I'm not going to do it again. Humility. I need your help in that. Keep these things away from me because I don't want to ever do that again.
Well, I liked what you said too about practice and repetition and all those things, because I think that's a huge part of it. You look at learning to play guitar. You don't pick up the guitar one day and can play, what's the most famous song you can think of? Freebird?
Or guitar.
Yeah.
Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway,
Yeah, Stairway to Heaven. There you go.
Stairway.
But the constant repetition, the constant sitting down and spending time doing it and learning, the more that you do it, the more confident you'll become in it. And it made me think a lot about our young adults that have just become Christians too. Like some of them have just started doing things. Some of them have been doing it a couple months, maybe a couple years, but the amount of confidence that some of them have, like they're just starting out, it just is exciting to me to think about, what they can do 10 to 15 years from now just by continuing to do what they're doing. But it's that repetition and continuing to do it. It's the hard part because sometimes you don't necessarily need to do it. You don't need to make a comment every single time. So is it inwardly making that comment in your head, be like, yeah, that was a good comment, Caleb. I've got confidence in that comment, but not actually saying it. So I don't know, but
I know my personal study, especially when it comes to like Christianity, my experience is I was young when I was baptized. I think, many who grew up in the church are. And it did lead to confidence, almost overconfidence, where almost naivety in confidence and saying, oh, I know what's going on. I didn't know what was going on. I hadn't read enough. I hadn't studied enough. I hadn't pondered enough. Didn't have a frontal lobe. You didn't have all the tools necessary to be a servant, which is one of the reasons why when you read the Levitical law, you weren't allowed to be an active priest until you had reached a certain age. Mm-hmm. And so there seems to be a maturity that God has recognized in our development.
Oh, yeah.
And so being a young man, Paul writes about that to Timothy. Don't let anybody despise your youth. But it is a thing. Youth is a thing, and it's definitely a season. And so that's the time for you to make mistakes. That's the time for you to be, to work out your faith, and just to say, you know what, whenever I was a younger man, I thought this. And now I've pondered that a lot. I've experienced some life. I've read the book, and this is now what I think. And I think every season of life allows for that new level of confidence.
I think you're right. So Psalm 20, verse 7, David says, I think it's David, I may be wrong, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember and trust in the name of the Lord our God. And if you remember in the old law, the king wasn't to, gain all of this things, but he was to write out the law. And to your point, in doing so, he's gaining confidence in what God says and who God is to help him in his reign as king. Otherwise, he would have confidence in the chariots and the horses, which doesn't help him in the long run and only leads to more pride than anything.
Yeah.
And not in God, which is what we should be doing. 2 Corinthians 3 came up as a passage for confidence. Verses 1 through 5 says, "Are we beginning to commend ourselves again?" So talking about ourselves and that pride. "We don't need letters of recommendation to you or from you as some other people do we? You yourselves are our letter." So you're like, what you do, like you are the stamp of
actions.
Yeah, written on our hearts, known and ready by everyone, revealing that you are a letter of Christ, delivered by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not as stone tablets, but on tablets of human hearts. Now we have such confidence in God through Christ and what he did, right? He's kind of like that word that the king was to be writing down. That's where our confidence should come from. Not that we are adequate in ourselves to consider anything as if it were coming from ourselves, but our adequacy is from God, who made us adequate to be servants of a new covenant, not based on the letter but on the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life.
It's definitely a repeated theme throughout the New Testament, or at least it seems that that's what Jesus is talking about, where he says, "They will know my people by their fruits."
Yeah.
And the fruits are, it grows from the heart, what's on your heart. That implies repentance, right? So you can't be of Satan, you can't be of the world, you can't be of self and produce good fruit. You have to think selflessly, you have to think for others. There's a confidence in that, where you say, you know what, I'm going to release these internal struggles that I have that are just based on my life and the things that I want to do. I'm going to start helping others. I'm going to start producing good fruit for others.
Be a living letter, right?
Precisely.
It's written, by Christ.
In the books of Peter, he talks about the living stones. It's like, well, this is a temple of God built with living stones. That's an amazing concept, right? We are the temple because of our actions, and we are the beacon of light in the darkness of the world.
So, Caleb, previous host, Caleb Spear.
Who? I'm kidding. We love you, Caleb. Sorry.
Was talking to me, and he made a really excellent point kind of about this. So if you are always scared or fearful, this is a truth. The one who conquers is Revelation 21, verse 8. The one who conquers will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowards, the unbelievers, detestable persons, murderers, sexual immoral, and those who practice magic spells or idol worshippers, and all those who lie, their place will be, the lake that burns with fire and sulfur. Cowards, like there's no cowards in heaven. I think that's the point that he made. And it really hit me, and I was like, wow, you know what? Yeah, heaven's a place for those that are confident and those that have placed their confidence in Christ.
They have faith.
Yeah.
It's and I know that's hard. It's definitely a more challenging concept to have. I'm not saying that I have it. I'm saying that I fake it. Which is why I'm sitting here talking to a microphone like I'm somebody, which I'm not. But that's the thing, is that I definitely have confidence in Christ. He's shown things in my life, when you are able to turn over, it's like, I have no control here. I don't know what's going on in my life. You can take control, and I'll just let you go, and I'll be here and believing in you. And the moments that I've done that, and I think that there's so many stories of other people who've done the same, and I think that's what we're supposed to do. It always tends to work out good. And that confidence that comes is very peaceful. It's very peaceful to have that kind of confidence in God.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it helps in everything too, not just in our faith and our eternity, but in our everyday conversations.
I think our generation is so much more open to people having their faith and having their walk. And so I hear so many, especially on podcasts now, big podcasts like Joe Rogan and all those other things, where people are talking about their faith openly.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really encouraging to hear that.
It is. He's had several people on, and they talk about God and...
Like I'm listening to the Hulk Hogan one now.
Yeah.
And he's talking about like his...
He has John 3:16 on his shirt, yeah.
And he's sitting there talking about his Jesus Christ is his Savior. It's sort of like, that's amazing. How many millions of people listening to that? And so, for those of you who are listening, we appreciate you, and we invite you to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for the conversation, guys.
Yeah, just to have an honest conversation about life and faith, and I hope it helps. Go so. If you want to know more about the Bible or you have any questions, our email is in the description below. You can DM us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're looking for a church family or you're in the Lubbock area, we invite you to come visit and hang out with us in Milwaukee. We love for you to find a church who practices the love of Christ.